These are the generations dating back to over 100 years ago. The lost generation refers to the group of individuals who came of age during World War I, followed by the generation that preceded the greatest generation. This social generation includes people born between 1883 and 1900, reaching maturity in the early 1900s or 1910s. They were disillusioned by the war and felt their inherited values were no longer relevant in the post-war world. This led to a sense of spiritual alienation from the perceived materialism and provincialism of American society. The lost generation who grew up post-industrial revolution were raised in increasingly literate, consumerist, and media-driven societies with traditional social values. Both young men and women were impacted by World War I, which was a significant event for this age group. Following the war, women gained more political and social freedoms. The lost generation, also affected by the Spanish flu pandemic, played a key role in cultural changes, especially in urban centers during the Roaring '20s. In midlife, they faced the Great Depression and saw their sons go to World War II. After the war, they reached retirement age and lived longer than average. The greatest generation refers to the generation of Americans who were born in the early 1900s and came of age during the Great Depression and World War II. They were born roughly between 1901 to 1927. This generation was shaped by the hardships of the Great Depression and the sacrifices required during World War II. Many members of the greatest generation served in World War II. They are credited with defeating fascism and helping establish the United States as a global superpower. After the war, this generation helped rebuild the economy, promoted conservative values, and produced the baby boomer generation. They are often praised for their character, humility, and the positive impact they had on American society. The term greatest generation was popularized by journalist Tom Brokaw in his 1998 book of the same name, in which he profiled members of this generation and extolled their virtues and achievements. The silent generation is generally defined as those born between the mid-1920s to the early 1940s. The term silent generation was coined by Time magazine in the 1950s to describe the generation that came of age during the post-World War II era. The silent generation grew up during a period of significant cultural and social change, including the rise of consumerism, the Cold War, and the Civil Rights Movement. They experienced the aftermath of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War tensions. They are often associated with a sense of conformity and adherence to traditional values and social norms. Many members of the silent generation benefited from the economic prosperity of the post-war era. They were the first to benefit from widespread access to higher education in the United States. Many members of this generation were able to attend college and pursue professional careers. The family was central to the lives of many members of the silent generation. They placed a strong emphasis on marriage, parenting, and maintaining stable family structures. They also have political influence. They have witnessed rapid technological advancements during their lifetimes, including the advent of television, the space race, and the rise of computers and the internet. The baby boomers are the demographic cohort following the silent generation. They are generally defined as people born from 1946 to 1964 during the mid-20th century baby boom period. The baby boom refers to the noticeable increase in birth rate after World War II. The post-war population increase was described as a boom by various newspaper reporters. Baby boomers are often the children of the greatest generation or the silent generation, and are often parents of Generation X and Millennials. As the relatively large number of young boomers entered their teens and young adulthood, they and those around them created a very specific rhetoric and social movements around their cohort, such as the counterculture of the 1960s. Baby boomers in some developed countries are currently the single biggest cohort in their societies due to sub-replacement fertility and aging populations. In the United States, baby boomers are the second most numerous age demographic after millennials. Generation X refers to the demographic cohort following the baby boomers and preceding the millennials. Generation X is typically defined as people born between the mid-1960s and the late 1970s. They were born between approximately 1965 and 1980, making them currently around 41 to 56 years old. Generation X is the smallest generational cohort, with around 65 million members in the United States as of 2019. They are sometimes called the MTV generation or latchkey generation, as they grew up with the rise of cable TV and were often home alone after school as children. Gen Xers are known for being self-reliant, valuing work-life balance, and being technologically adept but not as dependent on technology as younger generations. They came of age during major events like the end of the Cold War, the AIDS epidemic, and economic recessions, which shaped their outlook. Gen Xers are considered entrepreneurial and have founded many prominent tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Tesla. Millennials, also known as Generation Y, are the demographic cohort typically characterized as those born between the early 1980s and the mid-1990s to early 2000s. This generation is known for coming of age at the turn of the millennium, hence the term Millennials. Millennials are often seen as the generation that grew up alongside the rapid advancements in technology, such as the internet and smartphones. Millennials are often characterized as socially conscious and politically engaged. They value work-life balance and prioritize flexibility and autonomy in their careers. Due to economic challenges such as student loan debt and the financial impact of the 2008 recession, many millennials have delayed traditional milestones such as homeownership, marriage, and starting a family. They are the most educated generation to date, with higher rates of college attendance and graduation compared to previous generations. However, this has also led to significant student loans. They are globally connected and prefer brands that align with their values, and are adept at researching products and services online before making purchasing decisions. Generation Z, also known as Gen Z, refers to the demographic cohort of people born between the late 1990s and early 2010s. Gen Z is the most racially and ethnically diverse generation in the US to date, with nearly 50% being racial or ethnic minorities. They also have higher percentages of single-parent, mixed-race, and LGBTQ+ families compared to previous generations. They are the first true digital natives, having grown up with access to the internet and smartphones. They tend to use more anonymous social media platforms like Snapchat. Gen Zers are generally seen as more pragmatic, cautious, and earlier to mature than previous generations. They are more likely to graduate high school, go to college, and be careful in their career choices. This generation has been shaped by major events like the Great Recession, the War on Terror, and the COVID-19 pandemic. They are more likely to reside in cities and metropolitan areas compared to previous generations. Overall, Generation Z is the most diverse, technologically savvy, and pragmatic generation to date in the United States. Generation Alpha or Gen Alpha refers to the demographic cohort of people born between 2010 and 2025. They are the first generation to be born entirely in the 21st century. It is estimated that over 2.8 million members of Generation Alpha are born globally each week, and by 2025, they are expected to number over 2 billion people, making them the largest generation in history. Generation Alpha is the most racially and ethnically diverse generation in the United States, with white people representing only 48% of the population compared to 51% for Generation Z. They are considered digital natives who have grown up surrounded by technology like tablets, smartphones, and social media from a very young age. Their experiences have been significantly shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic, leading some researchers to refer to them as Gen C, or Generation COVID. Compared to previous generations, Generation Alpha is expected to be more educated, more accepting of diversity, and more cognizant of issues like climate change. These are the generations dating back to over 100 years ago explained.